Okay, so we've been working on turned around. Just some people this week that we're learning about. Yesterday was Zacchaeus and how his life got turned around. Today we're going to, now that went forward. Okay, so today we're going to go backward, and we're going to talk about a young man who has a problem early in his life. Something bad happens early in his life, and so and it's something that he has to kind of live with for the rest of his life, but in a different kind of way. Let me go ahead and explain. Okay, so we're going to meet up with this nurse. Well, she's called a nurse in the Bible. She's a lady, basically like a nanny, and she is taking care of a young boy. Now, at this point, he's about 5 years old. Word has come. The worst has happened. Back in the Old Testament times, there was lots of battles. We know that. There's lots of battles going back and forth. Do you remember the word Philistines? Okay. They don't ever really go away. They just simply try to keep coming back and coming back. Well, we talk about Philistines when we talk about David and Goliath, because Goliath, big tall dude, was a Philistine. Okay. And for a while, they had gone away. But then they kind of keep coming back around, keep trying to come back around. So here's what happens. The Philistine comes in, and at that time, the Philistine army comes in. And at that time, there was a man named King Saul. Saul was his name, and he was king. Now, he was king when David fought Goliath. That was the king that was in charge. Okay, well, he's still in charge. This is probably about 15 years later. Well, the Philistines come back again, and there's another great big battle. David's not involved in this battle at the time, but King Saul is, and so is his son Jonathan. Now, if we stop for a second and remember, when David met up with Goliath, okay, he had gone to see his brothers. He was supposed to take a treat to his brothers from his father, just to check on things. And then that's when he arrived. And of course, that's when, there you've got Goliath. Oh, who's going to fight against me? And he's making fun of all these of God's army. And so David's like, why isn't everybody going? So he says, I'll go. So he goes into King Saul. And this is when he meets King Saul. And he says, I'm willing to fight. So King Saul tries to give him his stuff to, his armor and stuff to wear. And David's like, no, that's not going to work because it's too big for me. So David goes, he takes care of Goliath. Now, not on his own power, on the power of God. So he goes, he says, in the name of the Lord, I'm going to fight you. So when that's finished, David goes back to being a shepherd. But remember, what did David do that was really good with his sheep? He played music. He knew how to really do music. Well, King Saul, from this point on, because King Saul knows that by that point, King Saul knew that he was not going to be king forever because he had messed up. God had put him in that job, but he had messed up. So eventually he knows that he's going to lose his job. He just doesn't know how. And he really had some, how could I put it nicely? Temper tantrums? Hissy fits? Bad moments. Yeah, he had some of those. And sometimes he would get really, 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 really wacko. And so they would be like, what are we going to do? And so they learned that music was calming for him. So they actually had David come, because David was like this, I guess by then, this well-known singer, player, whatever. And so they brought him in. And so he would play music, and that would kind of calm King Saul down. Well, King Saul had a son named Jonathan, and Jonathan and David were really good friends. And so they got to be really, really close with each other. Okay, now let's jump forward to what happens today in our lesson. Okay, so David, he's over there for a little while. Hang on. Well, he'll come back in a second. This is what happens. There's this huge big battle with the Philistines again. And yes, you guessed it, I bet. King Saul is killed in battle. And so is Jonathan, his son. They're both killed in battle. See, kings went to battle. Kings in there. And Jonathan would have been the prince, king, prince. And so they had all gone to battle. And of course, that's what happened. So, oh my goodness, this is terrible. See, if you don't have a king, okay, then somebody's going to take over your land. All right. So now, here's what happens. The king Saul, if something happened to him, then his son his son Jonathan would have been king, even though that's not what God said was going to happen. So that's what would have happened. Because if you're a king, you're the next person down would be the next king in line. So you had King David. I keep saying that. King Saul. You had King Saul, then you had his son Jonathan, which would have been Prince Jonathan, who should have taken over, but because they killed him, it would have gone to his son. Now, Jonathan actually had a son. By this point, Jonathan has a son. He's about 5 years old. His name is, are you ready for this? Mephibosheth. You want to say it again? Mephibosheth. That's a really cool name. So he's about 5 years old. Now, here's what happens. When somebody attacks a king and kills him, and then his son, Prince, that would mean that Mephibosheth would be the next king. But see, here's the crazy thing, because he's 5 years old. All right, so whoever's going to be in charge, what you do is, if you want to take over, you make sure that you kill the whole family. Because then that way, nobody can grow up and then be king. Okay, so that means that Mephibosheth is in danger. So this is what happens. When word gets back to the city that King Saul and Prince Jonathan have been killed in battle, there's this panic that sets in. Oh no, who's going to come and take over as king? Because the only one left was Mephibosheth, and he's only 5. Can you imagine if you were 5 and you had to be king of your country? That would be kind of scary. Because you're so little, you can't really do a whole lot. You don't even know how to read. How can you do anything? And then, so that means that somebody's going to come after Mephibosheth. So that nurse, that nanny, okay, she takes him and runs out of the city with him, but trips and falls on the way out. And he falls and he hurts his feet so bad. Oh, it's so much pain. Yeah, it's terrible. She grabbed him and just ran because she was trying to help him. She wasn't trying to hurt him. She was trying to keep him safe. She picks him up and runs out of the city with him, but somehow she trips and falls. And when he did, somehow he ended up falling and hurting his feet. I imagine breaking bones. And so, because back then they didn't have all the doctors and things that we have today, they didn't heal right. And so, you know what happens? He continues to have bad walking. He was hardly able to walk. He kind of like had to probably have crutches or, help, assistance the rest of his life, because his bones never healed correctly again. Oh, that is just so sad. But she did take him and she did hide him in a special place. And very few people knew that Mephibosheth was there. They just forgot. Well, somebody else takes over in charge for a while until the time, okay? Until it is time for someone else to take over being king. And do you know who that someone else is going to be? It's David! Okay, so now David is a much older man, okay? So when we met, the last time we talked really about David is when we talk about him with Goliath. And so he would have been probably somewhere in his young teenage years. So now it's been about 15 years later. So now David now is in charge and he is king, and he is going to be a really, really good king. And people cheer and they get excited and it's just wonderful. Oh, it's fantastic. Oh, he's doing a really good job. And he's doing what God wants him to do, at least for now. So one day, something brought to David's mind. Of course, God brings it to David's mind, and he remembers about a promise. Okay, let me tell you something. King Saul, he went wacko at times. And this is what happened. Sometimes when King Saul would get a little crazy, have a hissy fit, they would try the music, and they brought David in. Well, eventually, King Saul realizes God's got something special for David, and it really bothers King Saul. And so there are times when David will be playing his harp and his music just as lovely as he can, trying to calm King Saul down. And King Saul would take out a knife or a sword and he would throw it at David. Can you imagine being having a sword thrown at you? Yes. There were times when King Saul would get so, we'll call him wacko, that he would actually try to kill David. It got to a point where David had to run away because King Saul was after him because he was doing such great things. And he kind of had a thinking, I think I know what's going to happen with this man. No. And so he tried attacking him many times. In fact, got so mad at him that he even got his army together and they started chasing David around the area. They started chasing him. And it was crazy times. And David would just kept running because he knew that he can't hurt King Saul because that would make God unhappy with him. So he didn't want to do that, but he just had to be careful. And so there was a time that David was really in danger from King Saul. But now remember, Jonathan is his friend. Jonathan is King Saul's son. And so there was this time that the two of them met kind of secretly. They were in kind of like a field, and David was hiding, and they kind of planned to be there, but David was hiding so that King Saul wouldn't see him. And then Jonathan kind of just stood out in the field. Yes. Uh-huh. And there were times when they had met up, and at one point they became almost like they were such good friends that they became almost like brothers. And they promised each other that they would always take care of each other and each other's family. And so they were showing kindness to one another. Even though Jonathan's dad, okay, was giving David a hard time and trying to kill him many times, they still kept their friendship together. And almost they pretty much they felt each other like brothers. And so when David becomes king, he remembers, wait a minute, I remember my promise to Jonathan. I wonder if there's anybody else in the family. So he sends word out. Is there anyone else that is still in the family of King Saul or Jonathan that is out there? I would like to know that. Now he didn't know it because he was like, I'm going to take care of them. He was really sincerely honest. He says, I need to show them kindness. Do we have anyone? Well, there was the man that came up. His name was Ziba. Okay. This is Ziba. And Ziba comes up and he says, yes, there is one. Jonathan had a son named Mephibosheth. Oh, well, where is he? I would like to, I would like to meet him. I would like him to come and be with me here. Well, where is he? And he said, well, he's hiding and it's not very easy for him to get here. What do you mean? Well, when King Saul, and they told the story, when King Saul and Jonathan were killed in battle, the nurse rushed off with him to save him, to protect him, and they fell, and he was injured, and now he's just unable to walk very well anymore. Oh, bring him here, please. Oh, I must meet him. I must show kindness to him. I must show kindness to him like I promised his father that I would. So word was sent from Mephibosheth to come to the palace to see King David. Now, when Mephibosheth came, he was very, I guess you could say, very scared because, I mean, if he's a king that's going to be upset with him, might try to hurt him, because that would make it kind of scary. So when Mephibosheth came in, he came forward and he bowed before King David and he said, I am your servant. He said, oh no, Mephibosheth. And he tried to help him up. He says, no, I don't want you to be my servant. That's not why I brought you here. I don't want you to serve me. I want to take care of you. See, I promised your father that I would take care of you, that I would always show kindness to his family. Your father, Jonathan, was always kind to me, and I want to show that kindness to you. He says, I want you to stay here with me in the palace, and I want you to stay with me and live with me, and I will take care of you. Boy, what love, what kindness. Do you know that God loved us so much that he had a plan to show us even more kindness and even more love than David was showing Mephibosheth at that time? You see, remember, God let his son come here to die on the cross for you and I. And he did die, and he was buried, but he didn't stay buried. He rose again because he is our king. He is going to be the king in heaven that's going to be with us forever if we trust in him. So, as great as it was, oh, I love that things got turned around from Mephibosheth. That's our theme this week. Turned around. Who was turned around? Well, things were definitely turned around from Mephibosheth, because before he was living in just kind of in a town far away and didn't really have very much. He can't really do anything for himself. He can't take care of because of his injuries. But King David made it so that he would eat at his table from then on for the rest of his life. David really turned things around for Mephibosheth, and also too for David showing kindness to a family that had not really necessarily always been kind to him. Oh, Jonathan had. Jonathan had been kind to him, but King Saul, not so much. So let's do our job today. Let's be kind to others. Find somebody in the house that you can do something kind for today. All right, and I'll see you later. Have a great day.